Welcome to a story forged for fans of courage, heartbreak, and heroism, and for those who know what it means to carry a shield. Before we begin, a quick word. This story was written for young adults, especially those in their 20s. If you're younger, hey there, just make sure you're comfortable. If not, no hard feelings. But if you're still here, then welcome. You're more than welcome. Our story begins not on Earth, but in the shimmering halls of Asgard. A birth, a celebration, a family changed forever. But not everyone sees the arrival of a baby girl as a blessing. In the shadows, jealousy brews. And one brother makes a choice that will shape her fate. He steals her. In the dead of night, she's taken from her cradle and left on Earth. 1918. A new world, a new identity. No crown, no power, just survival. Years pass. War looms. And she grows up not as a goddess, but as a nurse. Healing wounded soldiers. Hiding the fire inside her. That is, until she crosses paths with a man who would one day be called a hero. But destiny doesn't wait. She's captured, dragged into a nightmare of experiments and cruelty. And they discover something about her. She doesn't feel pain. Her captors think they can break her, control her, turn her into a weapon. But they forgot one thing. She's not theirs to use. She escapes, fights back, outwits her captors. But just when freedom is within reach, she's mistaken for the enemy. A helicopter spirals, a seatbelt jams, ice awaits. And in that final moment, she knows. The world has no idea who she truly is. But they will. This is her story of love, betrayal, and strength forged in fire. This is Laila's beginning. Chapter 2. Avengers. Laila wakes up after so many years and she looks around the room confused. Where am I? Laila asks herself. Then she looks over to the nurse who walked in to check in on her. You, my dear, are in New York Presbyterian Hospital, the nurse replies as she grabs the charts and she notices Laila looking around confused. Laila notices a visitor for another patient, and she looks more confused as she sees the visitor holding a strange object to her ear. What is that? Laila asks, and she sees the nurse looking at her direction before looking back at her. That is an iPhone, ma'am. You woke up in the year 2012, the nurse says as Laila looks shocked, and she slowly nods as she processes the information. 65 years? I've been frozen for over 65 years, Laila tells herself. You weren't the only one, the nurse says, and Laila looks at the nurse. There was a guy as well. He was frozen at the same time as you, the nurse explained. Holy shit, Laila says as she holds her head, still processing everything. Then she realizes something. Wait, how am I going to... Laila was going to ask a question, but the nurse interrupted her. Someone is already paying the bills, the nurse says, and Laila nods. The nurse helps up Laila from her bed and helps her around the room. As soon as Laila gained feelings back in her legs to walk on her own, she comes out with, I feel better now, Laila says as she looks to the nurse. And the nurse nods before the nurse takes off the urostomy bag from her stomach. Laila goes to leave the hospital, and on her way out she hears a male voice call out to her and she turns around to face the man. Who are you? Laila asks. Call me Fury, Nick replies, and Laila nods. What do you want from me? Laila asks, confused. We need a distraction for the civilians. What's going to happen? It won't be pretty, Nick replies. And you want me to do that? Laila asks. Nick nods and both of them start to walk as Nick is explaining the situation. Wait, so you're telling me that the Norse gods are real? This whole time? Laila asks, shocked. Yep, Nick says. There's a lot of processing I need to do, Laila says to herself. Nick and Laila find themselves on the helicarrier, and Laila looks around before notices a man trapped in a glass cage, and the man looks shocked as he realises who it was. Impossible, the man says to himself. Who the hell are you? Laila asks the man. I'm your better, Loki says with a mischievous smirk. At what? Being a prisoner, I can clearly tell, Laila replies back. Laila, don't interact with him, Nick tells Laila, and Laila nods before walking off with Nick to talk about the mission. Without either of them knowing, Loki managed to escape by tricking his brother Thor. After a while, Laila goes to do her job and distracts the people, and she freezes in place as she sees a wormhole opening up. What the hell? Laila says, and she sees something come out of the wormhole and realises it's ships. Shit, Laila says before clearing parts of the city. After a few more people left, Laila notices a ship coming towards her but ducks after someone behind her yells, "Watch out!" A man with dirty blonde hair throws something at the ship and knocks it to the ground. Careful, miss, Thor says as he grabs his Mjolnir as it flies back to him and walks over to Laila. Thanks, Laila says, and both her and Thor fights off the aliens that coming from the wormhole. Who the hell is doing all of this? Laila asks. My brother, Loki. Well, my adoptive brother, Thor replies. Wow, what an asshole, Laila tells him, which makes Thor laugh a bit. Oh, he is all right, Thor says before knocking one of the ships down again. Laila notices something fly past them both, and she looks confused. What is he doing? Thor asks himself as he knows who it is, but Laila shrugs her shoulders. After a while, Laila follows Thor to the Stark Tower, and she notices Loki on the floor with everyone surrounding him, but Thor takes him back to Asgard. Steve looks to his side and realises who it is after Thor left. How is it? Steve thought to himself. Then he remembers when he shot down the helicopter. It was her in that helicopter, Steve says to himself before he notices Laila walking off. But he gets up and goes after her, yelling her name. Laila stops in her tracks and she turns around and looks at Steve. You're alive, Steve says after catching up to her. Yeah, I am, Laila says. Look, I didn't know it was you in that helicopter. I thought... Steve tries to explain, but Laila stops him from talking. I know, Laila says, then she hugs Steve back as he hugs her. Chapter 3. The Winter Soldier. After a couple of years, Laila walks to her kitchen after she bought her apartment, and she grabs some food from the fridge and starts to make herself something to eat. After eating, Laila notices her hamper is full of dirty washing. Shit, Laila says to herself, and she goes to grab a basket, then walks to the hamper and puts a few of the dirty clothes in the basket. And she walks out of the door and she tries to lock the door, but she drops her keys and she sighs to herself before hearing a male voice. Need help with that basket? A male voice calls out, and Laila looks over to the man. Yeah, thanks, Laila says to herself, but she has her guard up as he is technically a stranger to her, but the way he was there when she needs help sounds like he was doing something, and she thinks to herself as she gives him the basket. I'm August, August introduces himself. I'm Laila. Laila introduces herself, and she locks the door to her apartment and walks with August to the laundry room. Laila laughs at August's jokes, but she still has that gut feeling as she struggles to start the washing machine on. Let me guess, everything is complicated for you? August asks as he looks at Laila, which Laila scoffs softly, but her mind races with questions. It's, that obvious, huh? Laila asks, and August laughs a bit with her. Well, if you need help with technology, I'm always here, August tells her, and Laila smiles. Thank you, Laila replies, then she hesitates as August was about to leave the room, then she looks at August. Hail Hydra, Laila yells out to him, and she notices him freezing in place, which which raised her red flags in her mind, but she sees his confused face. "What's Hydra?" August asks. "Oh, thought you worshipped a being called Hydra." Laila laughs to herself, feeling like an idiot for thinking differently. "No, I very much worship Yeshua, or Jesus if you prefer," August tells her, and Laila nods. "Sorry," Laila says it's fine. August smiles, then he turns to leave and walks back to his apartment. Meanwhile, with Steve and Sam. Sam was on the run with Steve around Washington, D.C., when Steve catches up to him and runs past him. "Oh, you're left," Steve as he runs past, and Sam continues to jog as Steve comes around again quickly after doing another lap. "On your left," Steve says. "Uh-huh, on my left. Got it," Sam says as he keeps running. Sam continues to jog, and Steve comes around again from behind him from another lap. "Don't say it! Don't you say it!" Sam yells. "On your left," Steve says as he runs past again. "Come on!" Sam yells as he's getting angry and tries to catch up to him, but only after a few seconds, he's unable to carry on and rest on a tree. As Sam is resting, catching his breath, Steve walks over to him. "Need a medic?" Steve asks, and Sam just laughs. "I need a new set of lungs. Dude, you just ran like 13 miles in 30 minutes. "I guess I got a late start," Steve says. "Oh, really? You should be ashamed of yourself. You should take another lap." He hesitates for a moment. "Did you just take it? I assumed you just took it," Sam says sarcastically. "What unit you with?" Steve asks. 58 Pararescue, but now I'm working down at the VA, Sam replies. Sam lifts his hand to shake Steve's. "Sam Wilson." Sam introduces himself and Steve gives him a hand to rise. "Steve Rogers," Steve introduces back. "Yeah, I kind of put that together." "Must have freaked you out coming home after the whole defrosting thing," Sam says. "It takes some getting used to. It's good to meet you, Sam," Steve says. As Steve turns to leave, Sam speaks up again. "It's your bed, right?" Sam asks. "What's that?" Steve asks. "Your bed. It's too soft. When I was over there, I'd sleep on the ground and use rock for pillows like a caveman. Now I'm home, lying in my bed, and it's like," Sam says, "lying on a marshmallow. Feel like I'm gonna sink right to the floor," Steve says, and Sam smiles and nods his head. "How long?" Steve asks. 2 tours, Sam replies. "Well, things aren't so bad. Food's a lot better. We used to boil everything. No polio is good. Internet, so helpful. I've been reading that a lot, trying to catch up," Steve explains. Sam looks up to think and raises his finger. Marvin Gaye, 1972, Trouble Man soundtrack. "Everything you've missed jammed into one album," Sam tells Steve. "I'll put it on the list," Steve says as he grabs his small notebook and pen and writes Sam's suggestion down. His list also includes, in the American version of the movie, I Love Lucy, Moon Landing, Berlin Wall, Steve Jobs, Disco, Thai food, Star Wars and Trek. Star Wars crossed out indicating that he has seen it, Nirvana and Rocky. After writing Sam's suggestion down, Steve gets a message. Mission alert. Extraction imminent. Meet at the curb. The message reads, "All right, Sam, duty calls. Thanks for the run, if that's what you want to call running," Steve says, and they both shake hands. "Oh, that's how it is?" Sam asks. "Oh, that's how it is," Steve replies. "Okay, anytime you want to stop by at the VA, make me look awesome in front of the girl at the front desk. Just let me know," Sam laughs. "I'll keep that in mind," Steve says. "Okay," Sam says. Just then, Natasha pulls up in her car by the curb and rolls down the window. "Hey fellas, either one of you know where the Smithsonian is? I'm here to pick up a fossil," Natasha teases. "That's hilarious," Steve says as he walks over to her car and gets in. Sam gives Natasha and her car an appreciative look. How are you doing? Sam asks. Hey, Natasha replies. Can't run everywhere, Steve says. No, you can't, Sam says as he watches Natasha quickly pulls away and drives off. Back to Laila. Laila thinks for a moment as she heads back to her apartment with her laundry, and she puts it down near the door of the kitchen before going out again, not knowing that both Steve and Natasha are on a mission. Laila walks out of the building and she starts to walk towards the store. While walking, she feels like someone is watching her and she looks behind her to check before brushing it off. Has to be my imagination, Laila mutters to herself as she walks into the store. Laila looks around for some things like lady products, food, bathroom things, everything you can think of besides pet food, and she goes to pay. After paying, Laila heads home and she still has that feeling, but she brushes it off again. Stop playing with me, brain, Laila says before arriving home and starts to put everything away. Back to Steve. Everyone is in the Quinjet, flying over the Indian Ocean. The duo are with S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, led by Brock Rumlow. The target is a mobile satellite launch platform, the Lemurian Star. They were sending up their last payload when pirates took them, 93 minutes ago, Brock says. Any demands? Steve asks. $1.5 billion, Brock says. Why so steep? Steve asks again. Because it's shields, Brock says. So it's not off course, it's trespassing, Steve says. I'm sure they have a good reason, Natasha says. You know, I'm getting a little tired of being Fury's janitor, Steve says. Relax, it's not that complicated, Natasha says. How many pirates? Steve asks. 25 top mercs led by this guy, George Batroc, Brock says as he shows them a photo of Batroc on the monitor. Ex-DGSE, Action Division. He's at the top of Interpol's Red Notice. Before the French demobilised him, he had 36 kill missions. This guy's got a rep for maximum casualties, Brock says. Hostages? Steve asks. Mostly techs. One officer, Jasper Sitwell, Brock says as he pulls up Sitwell's photo on the monitor. They're in the galley, Brock says. What's Sitwell doing on a launch ship? Alright, I'm going to sweep the deck and find Batroc. Nat, you'll kill the engines and wait for instructions. Rumlow, you sweep aft, find the hostages, get them to the life pods, get them out. Let's move, Steve says. While everyone is starting the mission, back to Laila. Laila hears a knock on her door, and she goes to open the door and she sees August outside the door holding a couple of DVDs. August, what are you doing here? Laila asks. Well, I know you're far behind with everything, so I thought to help you with some movies, like George of the Jungle, August says, and Laila does a little smile. Thanks, August. Come on in, Laila says as she moves out of the door and allows August in. Laila went to her kitchen to make some popcorn, while August puts in the first DVD in the DVD player, which is George of the Jungle. After making popcorn and August put in the DVD, they sat down and watched the movies. Back to Steve as he arrived back. Steve walks into Fury's office. You just can't stop yourself from lying, can you? Steve asks. I didn't lie. Agent Romanoff had a different mission than yours, Fury says. Which you didn't feel obliged to share, Steve says. I'm not obliged to do anything, Fury says. Those hostages could have died, Nick, Steve says. I sent the greatest soldier in history to make sure that didn't happen, Fury says. Soldiers trust each other, that's what makes it an army. Not a bunch of guys running around and shooting guns. Steve, the last I trusted someone, I lost an eye, look! I didn't want you doing anything you weren't comfortable with. Agent Romanoff is comfortable with everything, Fury says. I can't lead a mission when the people I'm leading have missions of their own, Steve says. It's called compartmentalization. Nobody spills the secrets because nobody knows them all, Fury says. Except you, Steve says. You're wrong about me. I do share. I'm nice like that, Fury say. Fury leads Steve to the elevator and they talk more. Meanwhile, with Laila. I actually quite enjoyed that, Laila says. I'm glad you did, but I hope you know this wasn't a date. It was a neighbourly thing, August says. That's fine, Laila says as she smiles and she opens the door for August. And she watches him leave and she thinks to herself. Laila shuts the door after August has gone and she goes to clean the dishes. Back to Steve. After someone has shot Nick, Steve went back to the SHIELD base and walks over to Pierce. For whatever it's worth, you did your best, Alexander says. Thank you, sir, Sharon says as she turns to leave. She sees Steve. Captain Rogers, Sharon says. Neighbour, Steve says. Ah, Captain, I'm Alexander Pierce, Alexander says. Sir, it's an honour, Steve says. The honour is mine, Captain. My father served in the 101st. Come on in, Alexander says, and both of them went into Pierce's office, where he shows Steve an old photo of him and Fury. That photo was taken 5 years after Nick and I met, when I was at State Department in Bogota. ELN rebels took the embassy, and security got me out, but the rebels took hostages. Nick was deputy chief for the SHIELD station there. And he comes to me with a plan. He wants to storm the building through the sewers. I said, no, we'll negotiate. Turned out the ELN didn't negotiate, so they put out a kill order. They stormed the basement, and what did they find? They find it empty. Nick had ignored my direct order and carried out an unauthorized military operation on foreign soil. He saved the lives of 12 political officers, including my daughter. Alexander says. So you gave him a promotion, Steve says. I've never had any cause to regret it. Captain, why was Nick in your apartment last night? Alexander says. I don't know, Steve says. You know it was bugged? Alexander asks. I did, because Nick told me, Steve says. Did he tell you he was the one who bugged it? Alexander asks again. Steve doesn't reply as he doesn't know, and Alexander speaks up again. I want you to see something, Alexander says as he brings up footage of Batroc being interrogated. Is this live? Steve asks. Yeah, they picked him up last night in a not-so-safe house in Algiers, Alexander says. Are you saying he's a suspect? Assassination isn't Batroc's line? Steve asks. No, it's more complicated than that. Batroc was hired anonymously to attack the Lemurian star, and he was contacted by email and paid by wire transfer. And then the money was run through 17 fictitious accounts, the last one going to a holding company that was registered to a Jacob Veitch. Alexander says. Am I supposed to know who that is? Steve asks before Alexander hands over the file. Not likely. Veitch died 6 years ago. His last address was 14-35 Elmhurst Drive. When I first met Nick, his mother lived at 14-37, Alexander says. Are you saying Fury hired the pirate? Why? Steve says. The prevailing theory was that the hijacking was a cover for the acquisition and sale of classified intelligence. The sale went sour, and that led to Nick's death, Alexander says. If you really knew Nick Fury, you'd know that's not true, Steve says. Why do you think we're talking? See, I took a seat on the council, not because I wanted to, but because Nick asked me to, because we were both realists. We knew that despite all the diplomacy and the handshaking and the rhetoric, that to build a really better world sometimes means having to tear the old one down. And that makes enemies. Those people that call you dirty because you got the guts to stick your hands in the mud and try to build something better. And the idea that those people could be happy today makes me really, really angry. Captain, you were the last one to see Nick alive. I don't think that's an accident. and I don't think you do either. So I'm going to ask again, why was he there? Alexander asks. He told me not to trust anyone, Steve says. I wonder if that included him, Alexander says. Steve pauses for a moment before replying. I'm sorry. Those were his last words. Excuse me, Steve says as he picks up his shield and places it on his back and starts to make his out of the office. Captain, somebody murdered my friend and I'm going to find out why. Anyone gets in my way, they're going to regret it. Anyone, Alexander says as Steve stops and looks at him. Understood, Steve says as he turns and leaves. Back to Laila. After cleaning the dishes and tidying up the apartment, Laila rests on the couch and has a nap. Back to Steve. I'm sorry about what happened with Fury. Messed up. What happened to him? Brock says. Thank you, Steve says as he starts to feel something off, and Steve looks at the agents in the elevator and notices one of them is sweating. Then the elevator stops and more agents enter. Records, one of the soldiers says. Confirmed, the shield computer says as the elevator door shuts, and Steve notices he's surrounded by agents. Before we get started, does anyone want to get out? Steve asks, and there's a moment's pause before suddenly one of the agents turns and uses an electric rod to give Steve a shock. The others grab him and try to strap his wrists with magnetic cuffs. Steve manages to knock some of them down, but one cuff remains. Then Rumlow uses his rod to give Steve a shock. As Steve is being attacked, we see Sitwell in a controls room watching them from a monitor. Mobilize strike units, 25th floor, Sitwell says. Whoa, big guy. I just want you to know, Cap, this ain't personal, Brock says before attacking Steve again with the rod, but Steve manages to defend himself and eventually knocks him out. Kind of feels personal, Steve says, then he picks up his shield, then opens the elevator doors, but he's faced by a team of strike agents pointing their weapons at him. Back to Laila. Laila woken up and she goes to get something to eat. She makes herself some eggs and toast and she sits down and she eats not knowing that S.H.I.E.L.D. is being controlled by Hydra now. After a while, she hears her door knocking and she looks confused before walking over to the door and opening it up, and she sees Steve and Natasha. What's going on? Laila asks. We need your help with something private, Natasha asks, and Laila looks more confused. What is it? Laila asks, and Natasha explains what's going on, and Laila nods as she listens. Okay, I'll definitely help, Laila says, and both Steve and Natasha nods. As they were about to leave, Laila hears a male voice calling out her name, and she turns around and looks at August. Oh, August, Laila says. Who are they? August asks as he points to Steve and Natasha. They're my friends, Laila replies. But where are you going? August asks. I can't tell you, Laila explains. August nods as Steve unconsciously shifts from jealously, and Natasha notices, and she looks confused, then connects the dots. Steve watches the interaction more, but his jealousy boils over when he sees Laila kiss August on his cheek. See you later, Laila says as she smiles, then walks with Steve and Natasha to the car and gets inside. Who is that? Steve asks as he looks rear-view mirror to look at Laila, and Laila just shrugs. Just a guy who's my next-door neighbour, Laila replies. So, you're not seeing him? Steve asks. I don't know yet. We're taking things like our friendship really slow, Laila replies. Natasha sees Steve slowly gripping the wheel to mask his jealousy. Jealous, are we? Natasha asks Steve, and she notices him becoming defensive, which Laila notices as well. What? No, if she wants to date him, she can, Steve says, and Natasha looks at Laila before looking back at Steve. All of them arrive somewhere, and Laila gets out of the car with Steve and Natasha, and she looks around and notices the old nurse station she used to work at. Old memories, huh? Steve says. Yeah, ... Laila says. Come on, we're not here for that, Steve says, and all three of them walk over to a building. Army regulations forbid storing ammunition within 500 yards of the barracks. This building is in the wrong place, Steve says as he opens the building with his shield. This is S.H.I.E.L.D., Natasha says. Maybe where it started, Steve says as he walks in, but Natasha looks at Laila. I truthfully didn't know. I thought this place was a normal war bunker, Laila says, and Natasha nods before walking inside with her. There's Stark's father, Natasha says as she spots an old framed portrait of Howard Stark, Peggy and Callum Chester Phillips. Howard, Steve says. Who's the girl? Natasha says, and both Natasha and Laila notices Steve going quiet for a moment. Her name was Peggy, Laila says quietly, and Natasha nods, but she doesn't know that Peggy is alive, barely in a hospital bed. If you're already working in a secret office, Steve says as he pushes the bookshelf and slides open to reveal an elevator behind it. Why do you need to hide the elevator? Steve asks. They go down the elevator, which takes them to a room with old-looking computers, and Laila looks around but sees Natasha and Steve walk over to an old computer, and she follows them. This can't be the data point. This technology is ancient, Natasha says, before noticing a small flash drive port. She places the flash drive in it, which then activates the ancient computer in the room. Initiate system? The computer asks. Y-E-S spells yes, as she types on the keyboard, and she smiles as the old computer starts to crank up. Shall we play a game? Natasha says before turning to Steve and Laila. It's from a movie that... Natasha starts to explain, but Steve cut her off. Yeah, I saw it, Steve says. Saw what? Laila asks as she didn't see the Saw movie yet. Steve looks at Laila and explains a bit of the plot. Ah, Laila says as she understands it. Suddenly, they hear an accented voice speaking, and Laila looks shocked. Rogers, Stephen, born 1918. Romanoff, Natasha Avalia, born 1984. Jenkins, or should I say Odin's daughter Laila, born unknown but arrived in 1918 as a baby, Armin says, and they see an old camera moving above them as it analyses them. Steve looks at Laila for a moment as Laila stays quiet, as she's just as confused. It's some kind of a recording, Natasha says. I am not a recording for a line. I may not be the man I was when the captain took me prisoner in 1945, but I am, Armin says as he shows an old picture of himself. Do you know this thing? Natasha asks Steve. Arnim Zola was a German scientist who worked for the Red Skull. He's been dead for years, Steve says, and Natasha looks at Laila. He was the one who tried to torture me, Laila says. First, correction, I am Swiss. Second, look around you. I have never been more alive. In 1972, I received a terminal diagnosis. Science could not save my body. My mind, however, that was worth saving on 200,000 feet of data banks. You are standing in my brain, Armin says. How did you get here? Steve asks. Laila notices the same feeling again and she looks around. Guys, Laila says, but Steve and Natasha didn't look at her. I am afraid I have been stalling, Captain. Admit it. It's better this way. We're both of us out of time, Armin says. Steve notices a small opening on the ground. He throws the metal door aside, and just as the place explodes, he throws himself and Natasha and Laila into the hole and protects them with his shield. He then manages to get them out from under the building rubble, just as strike agents arrive to roam the area for them. Call in the asset, Rock says. Laila, Natasha and Steve ran back to the car and drove off. Laila notices a building and she looks confused before Steve parks up and walks into the building with her and Natasha alongside him. After a while, Sam arrives to his house and he notices Steve, Laila and Natasha. Hey, man, Sam says. I'm sorry about this. We need a place to lay low, Steve says. Everyone we know is trying to kill us, Natasha says. Not everyone, Sam says as he allows them into his house. As Steve and Natasha are talking in another room, Sam introduces himself to Laila. Sam Wilson, Sam says. Laila Jenkins. Laila introduces back as she smiles and she thinks to herself. After a while of talking, Sam went to Steve and Natasha, and they came into the kitchen, and Steve lets Laila catch up on what's been happening. So, the question is, who in S.H.I.E.L.D. could launch a domestic missile strike? Natasha asks. Pierce, Steve says. Who happens to be sitting on top of the most secure building in the world? Natasha says. But he's not working alone. Zola's algorithm was on the Lemurian star, Steve says. So was Jasper Sitwell, Natasha says. So, the real question is, how do the two most wanted people in Washington kidnap a S.H.I.E.L.D. officer in broad daylight? Steve asks. The answer is, you don't, Sam says as he drops a file in front of Steve. Both Laila and Steve looks confused for a moment before Steve asks. What's this? Steve asks. Call it a resume, Sam says as Natasha picks up a photo of Sam with his para-rescue team. Is this Bakmala? The Khalid mission, that was you? Natasha says before looking over to Steve. You didn't say he was a para-rescue, Natasha tells him. Is this Riley? Steve asks. Yeah, Sam replies. I heard they couldn't bring in the choppers because of the RPGs. What did you use? A stealth shoot? Natasha asks. No, these, Sam replies as he hands Steve the file and Steve opens it and reads it. I thought you said you were a pilot, Steve asks. I never said pilot, Sam replies. I can't ask you to do this, Sam. You left for a good reason, Steve says. Dude, Captain America needs my help. There's no better reason to get back in, Sam says. I mean, he's not wrong, Steve. Besides, we could use some extra help, Laila points out. Exactly. Thank you, Laila, Sam says. Just sticking up for my new friends, Laila says as she smiles. All right. But where can we get our hands on one of these things? Steve asks. The last one is at Fort Meade, behind 3 guarded gates and a 12-inch steel wall, Sam says. And Steve looks at Natasha, who shrugs her shoulders. Shouldn't be a problem, Steve says. Natasha thinks to herself, and she looks over to Laila as Steve and Sam talks. Laila? Natasha asks. Yeah, Laila replies as she looks at her. Do you know how to shoot a gun or anything like that? I feel like we need to protect ourselves, Natasha asks, and Laila shakes her head. Never shot a gun in my life, Laila tells her. Come with me, Natasha says, and both Laila and Natasha walks out of the apartment, and Natasha starts to teach Laila how to shoot a gun. After a while, everyone ends up on the roof. Laila just learned to shoot a gun to protect herself, and she thinks to herself as Steve talks. Tell me about Zola's algorithm, Steve asks. Never heard of it, Jasper says. What were you doing on the Lemurian star? Steve asks. I was throwing up, I get seasick, Jasper says, and Steve forces him to the edge of the rooftop. Jasper just smiles. Is this little display meant to insinuate that you're going to throw me off the roof? Because it's not really your style, Rogers, Jasper says. You're right, it's not. It's hers, Steve says as he steps aside and Natasha kicks Jasper off the room. Shall I convince you to talk to Laila, or? Natasha asks Steve as she looks at him. What? You know I'm not ready for that, Steve says. Uh-huh, Natasha says, but then Sam, in his Falcon jetpack suit, with wings, flies up holding Jasper and throws him down on the roof. Laila walks over to him alongside the others. Zola's algorithm is a program for choosing Insight's targets, Jasper says. What targets? Laila and Steve asks. You, a TV anchor in Cairo, the Undersecretary of Defense, a high school valedictorian in Lower City, Bruce Banner, Stephen Strange, anyone who's a treat to Hydra, now or in the future, Jasper says. The future? How could it know? Steve asks as Jasper laughs. How could it not? The 21st century is a digital book. Zola taught Hydra how to read it, Jasper explains, and Steve and Natasha and Laila looks at him confused. Your bank records, medical histories, voting patterns, emails, phone calls, your damn SAT scores? Zola's algorithm evaluates people's past to predict their future, Jasper finishes explaining. And what then? Steve asks. Oh my God, Pierce is gonna kill me, Jasper says, and Laila rolls her eyes as she knows he's going off topic for a reason. What then? Steve yells. Then the Insight helicarrier scratch people off the list. A few million at a time, Jasper says, and he grunts as Steve grabs him and all of them went to the car, and Steve pushes Jasper inside before they start to drive. Hydra doesn't like leaks, Jasper says. Laila gets that feeling again, and she looks at Natasha and mouths, "Something's wrong," before someone pulls Sitwell out through the window and throws him into the oncoming traffic, killing him. A strange man starts to shoot at them until Steve pulls the brake handle, making the man drop down onto the street, as another car hits them and pushes them along. We need to leave now, Laila yells, then hears the thumb on the car roof and sees a hand smashing through the windscreen and pulls out the steering wheel. Shit, Sam yells as Natasha starts shooting at him, but the Winter Soldier jumps onto the vehicle behind them. As the trio's car is being pulled off the road, Steve holds onto the car door. Hang on, Steve yells as he breaks open the door, holding on to Natasha and Sam. They slide on the car door through the streets. The Winter Soldier is joined by Hydra agents, and they start shooting at them. The trio scatter and run off in different directions, with the Winter Soldier shooting at Natasha, but she manages to shoot him in his eye goggle mask and run off. Ona mnie, my devil. She's mine. I'll take care of her. Find him, the Winter Soldier says. The Winter Soldier goes in pursuit of Natasha as the Hydra agents go after Steve and Sam, and Laila, who both manage to fend them off as they shoot at them. Steve then notices the Winter Soldier in pursuit of Natasha. Go! I got this! Sam yells as the Winter Soldier thought he found Natasha hiding behind a car. Laila manages to kick a gun out of one of the Hydra soldiers' hand and shoots the guy. Holy shit! Laila mutters to herself before defending herself from the upcoming soldiers. Then she goes to Steve and the Winter Soldier, but she could only see the back of Bucky's head. Bucky? Steve asks. Who the hell is Bucky? Bucky says before aiming his pistol at Steve, but Sam flies in and kicks Bucky aside. Bucky has a brief look of realization, but he quickly brushes it aside and takes aim again. But before he can shoot, Natasha uses the grenade launcher he dropped against him. He vanishes in the smoke of the explosion. Soon, all of them hear sirens, after which they are surrounded by Hydra agents. You've got to be fucking kidding me, Laila mutters to herself. Drop the shield, Cap. On your knees. Get on your knees. Now, get down. Get down, Brock says as Steve holds up his hands up. Get on your knees. Down, Brock says as he kicks Steve's leg and Steve kneels down. Don't move, Brock says before looking at the helicopter, then at Rollins. Put the gun down. Not here. Not here, Brock says, and Rollins lowers his gun, and the agents take Steve, Laila, Sam, and Natasha. It was him. He looked right at me like he didn't even know me, Steve says as they're now in the van. How's that even possible? It was like 70 years ago, Sam asks, and Layla's face changes from confused to thoughtful. It might be impossible. What if he went through what we did, but different at the same time? I mean, think about it. Me and Steve froze in a lake, but we have our memoirs intact. What if Hydra did something to him, to make him forget about everything while he was frozen? Laila suggests. That's pretty reasonable to me, Natasha says. I mean, it's Hydra, right? They would do some fucked up shit to him, Laila says, and Steve looks at Laila. Okay, I know my language, but still, Laila says, but Steve cuts her off. No, you're right. Hydra would do that, Steve says, and Sam notices Natasha is bleeding from her shoulders and looks at the guards. We need to get a doctor here. We don't put pressure on that wound. She's gonna bleed out here in the truck, Sam tells the guards. Suddenly one of the guards pulls out an electric rod and neutralizes the other guard and knocks him out. The guard is revealed to be Hill as she takes off her helmet. Ah, that thing was squeezing my brain, Maria says, and Sam looks at her confused, but Maria asks Steve. Who's this guy? Maria asks as Rumlow's crew stop their vehicles and get out. All holes. Start digging, Rock says, and they go to the van holding Steve, Laila, Sam and Natasha, and as they open the door, they find it empty, with one of the guards left unconscious and massive burnt hole on the car floor. Hill takes them to a secret facility. A man runs towards them, referring to Natasha's wound. GSW, she lost at least a pint, Maria says. Maybe 2, Sam says. Let me take her, Doctor says. She'll want to see him first, Maria says, and she takes them to Fury, who's alive and lying in bed. The others look shocked. About damn time, Nick says, later as Natasha's wound is being treated. Lacerated spinal column, cracked sternum, shattered collarbone, perforated liver, one hell of a headache, Nick says. Don't forget your collapsed lung, the doctor says. Oh, let's not forget that. Otherwise, I'm good, Nick says. Everyone starts to talk as Laila thinks to herself, but she does listen into the conversation. But Steve notices the distant look, but Laila came back after Steve taps her shoulders. Are you okay? Steve asks quietly. Yeah, just thinking. Laila does a little smile, and she realised that she would have been the same if she didn't fight back against Hydra. We have to stop the launch, Natasha says. I don't think the council's accepting my calls anymore, Nick says as he opens a case containing 3 chips. What's that? Sam asks. Once the helicarriers reach 3,000 feet, they'll triangulate with InSight satellites, Maria says. We need to breach those carriers and replace their targeting blades with our own, Nick says. As everyone comes up with a plan and they start to get ready for the plan and they go after a while, one of the tech goes and opens the door and he's faced with Steve. Sam, Laila and Hill on the other side of the door. Excuse us, Steve says as he walks in, and Steve uses the microphone so everyone can hear him. Attention, all S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. This is Steve Rogers. You've heard a lot about me over the last few days. Some of you were even ordered to hunt me down. But I think it's time you know the truth. S.H.I.E.L.D. is not what we thought it was. It's been taken over by Hydra. Alexander Pierce is their leader. The Strike and InSight crew are Hydra as well. I don't know how many more, but I know they're in the building. They could be standing right next to you. They almost have what they want. Absolute control. They shot Nick Fury, and it won't end there. If you launch those helicarriers today, Hydra will be able to kill anyone that stands in their way, unless we stop them. I know I'm asking a lot, but the price of freedom is high, it always has been, and it's a price I'm willing to pay. And if I'm the only one, then so be it. But I'm willing to bet I'm not, Steve says. Did you write that down first, or was it off the top of your head? Sam asks. Steve, Laila and Sam make their way to the helicarriers. Hey Cap, how do we know the good guys from the bad guys? Sam asks. If they're shooting at you, they're bad, Steve says as Laila laughs to herself. Sam, in his Falcon suit, flies off and Steve heads down. Meanwhile, Laila stays where she is and the soldiers starts to shoot at them, and Sam flies around avoiding getting shot. while Laila ducks and fights off the soldiers. "Hey Cap, I found those bad guys you were talking about," Sam says. "You okay?" Steve asks. "I'm not dead yet," Sam says. "Boys, I don't know about you, but we need to stay focused. You can do your little flirting after, okay?" Laila teases them as she continues to fight off the soldiers. As Laila continues to fight, she gets shot in her arms after feeling the same feeling. "Shit," Laila says, and she sees the Winter Soldier walking over. "Son of a bitch," Laila mutters to herself before fighting him as he pins her against the rail. Laila notices an opening between his legs and she looks at his eyes. "You might want to hold your balls," Laila says, which makes the Winter Soldier look confused before grunting in pain as Laila kicks him hard in the crotch area and kicks him again to make sure he stays down before running off. The Winter Soldier stood up after a while, then he goes to Steve and pushes him off the edge, and he grabs Sam's wings and throws him back. Sam starts shooting at Bucky, and as he goes to fly off, Bucky uses his weapon to rip off one of Sam's wings and kicks him off the helicarrier. Sam manages to get his parachute out and lands on the roof of the Triskelion. Captain, come in. Are you okay?" Sam asks. "Yeah, I'm here. I'm still on the helicarrier," Steve says as he pulls himself up. "Where are you?" Steve asks. "I'm grounded. The suit's down. Sorry, Cap," Sam says. "Don't worry, I got it," Steve says and sees the Winter Soldier confront him. Meanwhile, with Laila, she manages to jump off the helicarrier and swam back to the shore, and she goes to help Sam with Brock. After a while, Laila feels a weird pull, and she walks to a hospital building and she sees old Peggy laying on the hospital bed, but as soon as she was about to leave, she hears her name being called out. "Laila!" Peggy calls out. Laila walks into the room and she sits down on the chair. "Hey, Mrs. Cater," Laila says after seeing an image of her and her husband. "I need you to do something for me. I know Steve still loves me, but it's time for him to move on," Peggy says. "What if I'm not good enough for him?" Laila says. "You're strong. When you sensed danger back in the 40s, you fought," Peggy says. "How did you?" Laila asks. "Howard showed me a footage," Peggy says, and Laila nods. "I promise you, Peggy, I'll try my best," Laila says as she does a little sad smile. While Laila and Peggy are talking, Steve arrives in another hospital after everything that happened on the helicarrier. Laila doesn't know that Steve managed to break Bucky free for a while. Laila arrives home, but she hears a male voice and she looks over to August. "Oh, hey, August," Laila says as she forgot that she's covered in blood. "Hey, Laila." "Wait, what happened?" August asks, and Laila looks down to her wounds, then back at him. "Oh, I've been a heated fight," Laila says. "Was it that man?" "I swear if it was," August says. No, it wasn't Steve. It was a random person," Laila says, then shrugs her shoulders as August nods as he sighs of relief. "Can I ask why you are here?" Laila asks. "Well, I wanted to ask you out. On a date," August says, and Laila smiles. "I would love to go out on a date with you, August," Laila says as she smiles. "Tomorrow at 10, August asks, and Laila nods. Then she shuts the door as August left and she smiles to herself. The next day, Laila gets up and gets dressed before doing everything she needed to do in the apartment, and she sat down to take a break. At around 7 p.m, Laila finishes the movie she was watching and she starts to get ready for the date. After getting ready, Laila hears the door knock as it's now 10 p.m, and she goes to open the door and sees August, and she smiles. "Whoa, you look beautiful," August says as he looks at Laila. "Thanks, you look handsome," Laila says, and August chuckles a bit. "Ready to go?" August asks, and Laila nods, before August takes her arm and takes her to a restaurant. Laila and August talks and laugh as the date goes on, and Laila smiles as she learns about August more. After the date, Laila and August go back to their apartment. "I really enjoyed that," Laila says as she looks at August. "So did I," August says, then he came closer and kisses Laila on her lips, and Laila kisses him back before August walked into his apartment, and Laila walked into hers with a smile on her face.